I'm telling you this, but I ain't supposed to say nothing. But they doing this big drug investigation, and your name came up.
Because the car.
And I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, I'm thinking he's just trying to pump me up. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause I did talk to him during the course of my time off. I filed an EO and everything. I was trying to get my job back. So I'm thinking he's just trying to make himself look good. But in around February of '86, I be damned, it was a big drug bust at the post office. When I say big drug bust, I'm talking about. So we grew up on Truce Lake. One of my earliest memories was me and my brothers and sister jumping on my father for arguing with my mother, and he took off going down the street in a taxi cab.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of my earliest memories. And then around 5 years old, my mother and my stepfather, we went to Alaska. And we stayed in Alaska. I think my stepfather went up there to get a job on the pipeline around 64, 65. And we stayed up there about 6 months. And then I had a few experiences up there. I remember having rock fights with the neighbors. And as a matter of fact, I started a fire in the apartment. My mother was on the couch asleep. And I was playing with a lighter and wax paper.
That's my big brother.
And that wax paper caught on fire. And I automatically just tossed it out of my hand, because I don't know if you ever lit wax paper, but it goes up quick. And I tossed it and hit the curtains. And the curtains caught fire. Next thing we know, I'm trying to throw water on the curtains with a glass of water, wake my mom up. We had to evacuate the whole apartment building. And that we was all standing outside in the street in the cold in Alaska. That's one of my earliest memories that I had.
Mama, how was she acting when you woke her up?
No, she was in panic because we had to run out the house because the whole drapes were on fire. So, like I said, I'd already went, got 2 or 3 glasses of water, calling myself extinguishing the fire. So then she finally woke up. We had to evacuate. It wasn't like an apartment complex like this. It was just like an apartment building where we all had to evacuate.
So it didn't burn it completely down, though?
No.
Like y'all?
No, we had damage to my apartment. And I really don't know what we had to do after that, but it was damage to the apartment for sure.
What was early Kansas City like? Then you was like, it was like Black Panthers and stuff like.
Oh yeah, you told me, yeah, way back. I think we came back to Kansas City in around '65.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the Panthers was rolling the streets. They was on 29th and Prospect, right next to the Byron Hotel. That was the headquarters. The Black Panthers, cause you know the '60s was when I was growing up. The '60s, you know, it was the civil rights, the real struggle for Black people in America came to a head during the '60s. You know, we had assassinations. Kennedy assassinated in '63, Medgar Evers, Malcom X, and you had John Kennedy, Martin Luther King, all that was during the '60s. And where I grew up was on 29th in Indiana, so the Panther headquarters was right at 29th and Prospect, right next to a hotel called the Byron Hotel. And the Byron Hotel, you know, you would call it like a seedy establishment. I think there was prostitution and things going on. And the Panthers headquarters were right next door to it. You know, we used to walk by it on a regular basis. They had sandbags in the window, bullet holes in the glass. You know, and the Panthers, I mean, back then the Panthers ruled the streets. Because if you're outside playing and the Panthers go by, and if you don't stop and give them the Black Power salute, they're pulling over. They had a little Volkswagen, one of those Volkswagen, I don't know, a Volkswagen, like a van.
Mm-hmm.
Volkswagen van. You had a big Panther on the side. It was green with a big Black Panther painted on the side. And if they rolled by and you didn't stop what you were doing and salute, they was pulling over and asking you didn't see us driving by? You know, you had to throw up the sign real quick. You know, but they were our friends. I mean, they were the enemy to so-called establishment, but they was representing us. So, you know, we respected the Panthers back in the day.
You was a teenager around that time?
No, I was 8 years old.
8 years old.
68, I was 8.
Did you aspire to be one?
Oh, yeah. You wanted to grow up to be a Panther because they were standing up to the establishment.
Yeah.
You know, they had they black berets, they leather jackets, they afros, and their main purpose was to police the police. So a lot of people have a misconception about the Panthers, thinking there was a militant group. What they were a pro-black group. Just because you're pro-black doesn't mean that you're militant.
Yeah.
But their thing was when the police pulled somebody over, if they was riding by, they'd stop and observe the police tactics. And naturally, the police didn't like to be observed, especially back in the 60s. Because, you know, you're still in the middle of J. Edgar Hoover. You had the Vietnam War going on. You had a lot of things going on in the country. And the Panthers stood up. And they had a 10-point program. They had a free breakfast program. And the Black Panther Party was really just another political party like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, the GOP, which stands for Grand Old Party back then. They were just a third political party, and they stood for the rights of black people. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people didn't like it because, as a matter of fact, the Black Panthers was the first reason why we came out with gun control, because Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, and he was giving a speech on the steps, and the Panthers walked in the Capitol building with their guns. They wasn't loaded, with their guns and everything, and it threw everybody up into a panic. That's when they came out with gun control. Mm-hmm. So it's opposite nowadays, where the Second Amendment is a strong thing that people go by. But when those Panthers was carrying those guns, they put gun control into play, where only certain people could carry guns, concealed weapons, and all that type of thing.
Did you understand what was going on as far as what happened with Malcolm and Martin around that time?
Oh yeah, I understood, because from a young age, what I used to do, we stayed on 29th in Indiana, and I was fortunate enough. Well, you know, I had basically in my life I had four fathers. I had my biological father, who I didn't really know, who passed in '74. I'm named after him. Then I had my grandfather, Ed Dillard, rest in peace. And then I had my uncle, Dr. Albert M. Crocker, rest in peace. And back then the driveway was the dividing line. We stayed in one house, then we had a shared driveway, then my uncle stayed next door. My aunt and uncle stayed next door. And so back then, my uncle was was a prominent black pediatrician in the city, one of the first. And he would know all the people, the police captains and everybody in the higher positions, called more than likely he took care of their children. So they would sit down in the living room, and I'd sit around the corner up the steps and listen to their conversations. And I was getting my first taste of the political environment in Kansas City. You know, Bruce Watkins, Leon Jordan, people like that, Lee Bohannon. These were people who were doing things in the black community back then. So I would overhear and I would listen. And ever since an early age, I've always been interested in the news, current events, politics, things like that. You know, I'd watch the evening news. We used to have two newspapers, the Kansas City Star. There was a morning edition, then there was an evening edition. And when I'd come home from school, I'd lay back. We had what they call a den in the back room, and I'd lay on the floor and spread the paper out and read the paper from front to back. Then I'd watch the evening news and things. So I was always up on current events. So when Malcom X got killed, I was only 5 years old, but I remember, as a matter of fact, I remember vaguely the Kennedy assassination because I was 3, but I remember all the adults crying. And I didn't understand the significance of it. But later on in life, my grandmother was an avid reader, which I am to this day, and she had a library, and we used to get a Life magazine. It used to be a magazine called Life Magazine, and it would have pictorials and articles on certain things and current events, and I would sit there and read all of those things, and they had a big layout about the Kennedy assassination, Oswald, the conspiracy, and things like that. And then when King got killed, Malcolm X said, the chickens will come home to roost. And he got in trouble with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And, the Muslims kind of put him on a ban, and he was ostracized, the real in-depth thing, that's in the history books. So I was aware of Malcolm X. I knew about the Medgar Evers assassination, because like I said, they was talking about it and the riots and things like that. So yeah, I always took part in the political activism, even though I was a little child, because the people around me were discussing it. I was listening on the conversations.
Was there see we nowadays we experience deaths like Tupac or Nipsey Hussle or something like that in the air. You could feel it in the air, or even like Kobe Bryant, you could feel it in the air.
Yeah.
But those I ain't gonna say theirs wasn't significant. Like what those meant at that time though had to be heavy. So was the environment real heavy? Like could you feel like a shift in the environment? And stuff?
Oh yeah. Now, like you said, Kobe and them, those were more cultural phenomenons. You know, they were niche people. But when the Panthers, like when Malcolm got assassinated, the Muslims were coming around, and the Muslims were kind of like the black enforcers. You know, when the Muslims was on the street, you didn't cross the Muslim. I think they called them the fruit of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you didn't cross them. You gave them their space, and you respected them though because they were standing up. You got to remember, you know, when I was born in 1960, Jim Crow laws were still in effect down in the South. So black people were still under the thumb, if you will, of the so-called man. You know, the police would come in the neighborhoods. They would, pull us over. They'd talk to us. But back then, we knew the police car. The police car came around. It was the same policeman every day, but you knew, basically what they say, stayed in your place. And even though we was in Kansas City, a lot of people, don't realize Kansas City, the state of Missouri was one of the last states to ratify slavery. So a lot of those things that was happening back then, and we were all in the same neighborhood. You know, the neighborhood when I grew up, if you went past like 47th Street, you was basically in the suburbs. So, we all stayed in our little area, and we all knew when we walked everywhere, and, we had things. And it's funny because, like I said, I was born in 60. One of my coworkers years ago showed me her yearbook. She graduated from Central High School in 1963. The school was all white. In 1963, Central was all white. By 68, when Martin King got assassinated, then Central was all black. So that time period back then, like I said, the Panthers was rolling through the neighborhood. We was all aware of what was going on. You had the Vietnam War starting up. So, make love, not war, the hippie era, all of that. And then, when we grow up, when King and all those people died, it was a national mourning. It wasn't just a local thing. When Nipsey Hussle passed away, I know his funeral was on television, but the whole country didn't shut down for Nipsey Hussle.
Yeah.
The whole country might have mourned, but really, I can't even say the whole country, the younger generation.
Just a lot of people.
Your age group more with him, the hip hop society. And then when Kobe, he was a national sports figure. So naturally y'all felt a twinge of, when Kobe died. But like I said, Malcom X assassination, because now, it was a black man, they say, pulled the trigger. So then you have that aspect of it. Was it the black Muslims that had him assassinated? Or was it the government and J. Edgar Hoover, who, was still running the FBI at that particular time? And when all that happened, I found, I read a book later on called COINTELPRO, which is called the Counterintelligence Program by the FBI, where they had memos in there where the FBI said, we cannot allow for the rise of another black messiah, such as Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, things like that.
Can you remember some of the racism you might have experienced when you was younger?
Oh, well, yeah. Downtown 12th and Grand, they had an arcade. They had a Woolworths. We couldn't go in Woolworths and eat like everybody else.
What is that? A Woolworth?
It's like it's what they call it now, like a five and dime store. TGNY. Let me see. Woolworth was kind of like a Kmart.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, kind of like before Kmart came around, or it might have been at the same level as Kmart.
Okay.
You know, you couldn't go downtown and you couldn't try clothes on. It was Fairyland, was at 75th and Prospect. It was an amusement park. Right now, there's a place that I go to that I've been to called Alpha Point, the Fairyland Museum. Said right on the corner. Now I don't remember. I remember my mom, my grandfather them said the only time black people could go was on the first day to try out the rides to see if anything went wrong. We would be the experiment.
Wow.
But yeah, Fairyland Park. They had two rides. They had the roller coaster. It's called the Wildcat. And they had another ride called the Bullet. And those was like the rides when we did get to go out there. Those were the two prominent rides at Fairyland. But you know, we didn't go down to the Plaza. Plaza was, you know, kind of off limits.
I can imagine.
It wasn't too bad because, you know, I was a child at that time. But and I went to private schools. I was fortunate enough. I stayed with my grandparents. When I came back from Alaska, they gave me a choice to go live with my grandparents, where my brother and sister were staying, to go live with my mom. I chose to go live with my brother and sister, who were staying with my grandparents. And we grew up middle class. I didn't have a bad childhood because my grandmother and my grandfather both worked for government agencies. My grandfather worked for Lake City Ammunition, which has since been revitalized, and my grandmother worked for the Department of Defense. She made maps. So we was fortunate enough to, you know, go to private school, had a good foundation, good education. You know, the nuns and the priests, you know, we couldn't do things back then, you know, because they were fairly strict.
What was a good paying job back then? About like $5 an hour or something like that?
I'm not quite sure. You know, back then they didn't discuss wages with us, but I mean, it was a government job. Yeah. And a lot of times, you know, back here in the North, so-called North, that's why a lot of black people migrated from the South to come up and get jobs, and both my grandparents had pretty decent jobs. I mean, we had a middle class life. I can tell you the experience I had. I went to a school called St. Vincent. I think it's right at 31st and Flora. I think the church and everything is still there. Last I could see, but the nuns called home and told my grandparents that my sister needs psychiatric help because she's telling people that we have cold air coming out of the floor and that we don't have to wash dishes because we have a machine to wash dishes, which we had. We had central air and we had a dishwasher. But back then, the nuns thought that my sister was delusional. So what my grandparents had to do, they had to invite the priest, Father Laba, and I'm quite sure he's since passed away, and the nuns over for a Sunday dinner to come in and see the environment that we lived in. Because in the 60s, you know, it was still a struggle for most black people.
Like, y'all can't have
exactly. They didn't think it was possible for us as so-called Negroes back then had cold air coming up out of the floor. And we did.
Is your sister older or younger than you?
She's older than me. I'm the third child. Older brother, older sister, me, and I have a younger sister.
Do you remember how that affected her then? Like, did that bother her any?
No, it didn't bother us.
Oh, okay.
It didn't bother us because one thing as we was growing up, my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunt, Dr. Crocker, I spoke of before, his wife, they were, I don't want to use the term mental, they was conscious. So they knew, you know, the things that was going on amongst black people and white people back then. And they always taught us to be proud. You know, James Brown had that song, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud.
Can you sing it? I don't know if I know what you're talking about.
You don't know it?
I was just trying to get you to sing it.
Come on, man. I ain't falling for the oak, you know. No. I mean, but my grandfather, I had the best of both worlds. And my grandfather he wasn't a hustler, but he shot pool. He shot pool. Mm-hmm. And at that age, I don't care where we were. My grandfather said, "Say it loud." I'm a little kid. I'm saying I'm black and I'm proud. I mean, that's what you did on the streets. I mean, you be walking anywhere and somebody say it loud. Mm-hmm. I'm black and I'm proud. Mm-hmm. You know, and that, as a matter of fact, James Brown, that was kind of the theme of the 60s back then. Because in 68, the riots, they had riots in 65, the Watts riots in 65. And then in 68, it was riots in most of the major cities across the country. And I was right there with it.
For those of us who don't know, because obviously other people going to be listening, can you explain to us what the Jim Crow laws are?
Oh, the Jim Crow laws were certain laws that they had in the South. 1865 was the Emancipation Proclamation where they supposedly ended slavery. Okay, so then for several years, it was the North versus the South. The North troops were still in the South regimenting what the South can do to make sure that free blacks still had their rights and everything like that. But then after a while, the North pulled their troops out, and then the South still couldn't have slavery, but they instituted Jim Crow laws, such as if a black man walking down the street and a white woman or white people come by, then you had to get off the sidewalk. And I just found out recently they had like 1,001 Jim Crow laws that varied from different things, about how much money you had to have in your pocket, what kind of clothes you could have on. I mean, it was all different type of things. That's what they call the Jim Crow South. As a matter of fact, I just found out recently that up until the year 2000 in Alabama, interracial marriage was still outlawed. That just came off the books in the year 2000.
Damn. When Malcom X said the chickens will come home to roost, what do you mean by that?
Basically that eventually you're going to have to come back to the means. Like, and I can't really tell you what he meant, but it's like sooner or later, all this going on is going to come back. It's going to come back. You can all do all this, but sooner or later, you're going to revert back to the means.
Growing up, before I go there, when gang banging started coming to do you remember that? When gang banging came to Kansas City?
Well, I don't, because I was not part of that environment. I know what people said came to Kansas City. The Bloods and the Crips. I don't know anything about that. And one thing I used to do when I'd be around young people, I'd ask them, do they know anybody? Nobody that I knew anybody. And I know I can't speak on it, but the gangs that I was familiar with was like the Blackstone Rangers out of Chicago and a couple other groups, the El Rukins, things like that, because as I said, I used to read books that talked about them. Now, I know around, I guess, the 80s, maybe early 90s, where a couple of movies came out, Colors, and there was another movie where the guy had the videotape. I can't, you know what movie I'm talking about.
Are you talking about Spike Lee stuff?
No,
I'm thinking of the Boombox.
It was a movie where a guy recorded a robbery, and there was a tape floating around in the movie.
Oh, Menace to Society.
Yeah, there you go.
Menace to Society.
Yeah, Menace to Society. That, movies like that, but I was never part of a gang environment. I didn't know anybody that was.
Yeah. So seeing that on the movies and stuff, were you shocked by it?
No, I wasn't really shocked because we knew about it in L.A. You heard about the Bloods and the Crips in L.A.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. But a lot of times the narrative of the news is not actually what's going on in the streets, because the white news reporter can't go off into the neighborhood and get the true essence of what particularly took place. Because people didn't talk to, white people were the enemy back then. They was kind of like the enemy because they was the one that was oppressing us as a people. Maybe not individually, but as a people, we knew what was going on in the United States back then.
And police brutality was probably just as bad, or not worse, then it just wasn't recorded.
Yeah, it was the same, because all the major riots that took place in the United States during the 60s were more than likely because of police brutality. The Watts riots, because I believe they beat somebody up.
Wasn't that Rodney? Was that?
No, that Rodney King was like in '94, man. I'm talking about '65. You know, all the time period I'm talking about, all this place, turbulent. The '60s was turbulent. You know, we had assassinations, we had riots. We were still dealing with a racist government. You know, Nixon, the Republicans. You know, there's a lot of things. I can't even say the Republicans, because what a lot of people fail to realize too is that the Democrats had control of the Senate from like 55 to 95, and some of the most racist people, George Wallace, was a Republican. But see, the parties changed and their philosophies changed. And back in the 60s, you had what you call the Dixiecrats, which were the Democrats who were staunch segregationists. So that's what happened. And see, nowadays people always assume that it's always been the Republicans, but no, that it hadn't always been the Republicans. But the philosophies just changed, and now you see how it is now. But when I grew up, like I said, the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate for 40 years until Newt Gingrich and his boys came in like 93, 94 under Clinton. And ever since then, their whole sole purpose is disruptive politics.
When you started around the 80s, I would imagine, was you still in like the neighborhood around the 80s, maybe?
In the 80s?
Yeah.
Oh, in the 80s, I was still in the neighborhood by then. I started working at the Postal Service in '79 when I was 18 years old.
So around that time, was drugs hitting Kansas City heavy? Did crack hit Kansas City heavy?
Crack was, but we didn't, well, it's one thing that I'm not quite sure about. Back then, it was a thing called freebasing. And I believe crack is more potent. But back then, a lot of people were they doing freebase. And Richard Pryor, if you ever saw Richard Pryor's stand-up, that's what he was talking about. He was freebasing when he caught on fire. Then all of a sudden, freebase came known as crack. And I'm not sure. I think crack is more potent and more addictive. But when I was growing up around, like I said, I started in '79, and freebasing, you know, that's was the thing that a lot of people were doing, was freebasing.
Yeah. Do you know how you felt about the streets at that time? Because I would imagine like the neighborhood started getting messed up and all of that. Like,
well, no, not where I grew up. Like at 29th Indiana, 29th and Benton was where I had my first apartment. That's what I call the penthouse on the boulevard, you know.
You want to explain that?
Yeah, you know, top floor on the boulevard, man. But yeah, freebasing, and it was a thing because I took part in it. I took part in it because that was the thing to do. And the particular woman that I was dating at a particular time, she was what you know was the cook. And the cook, if you with the cook, then you get high for free because the cook doesn't have to pay. But one night, me and a friend of mine, we set up one night, and the thing was we go by what they call an 8-ball. An 8-ball, I guess, was an eighth of an ounce, and you would cook it up. So what you do is you cook it up, you get high, and then you sell the rest. Well, that particular night, we smoked it all up, you know. And it's one of those things, it's a feeling that you get that you've never felt before. And that's what everybody is, chasing. In my opinion, that's what they're chasing. That first feeling, but you never get it back. And that one night, I spent a whole paycheck that night, and it had me where I'm looking through the carpet, looking for any speck of anything. Is this, you know, that one more hit? So that night, I had blown my whole paycheck. I went home. I'm not high anymore. And I'm depressed. So I walked down the street. I might have drove, but my grandparents stayed on 29th in Indiana. Then you got a few streets and you got 29th and Benton. So I was only a few blocks from my grandparents. So I went over there. My grandfather's sitting up, and, you know, I'm talking to him. I start crying. He's like, "What's going on?" He called me Beef. You know, what's wrong, Beef? You know, I'm just feeling lonely, you know. So I go downstairs, wake my brother up, start talking to him, start crying to him. He's talking about, man, you know, sometimes in life, no matter what, you just had that lonely feeling. So I experienced it that night, and that's the last time I touched it. You know, I never, you know, messed with it. I'd go, my boys stayed down on 31st Street We pull up, and everybody coming up, pulling out, guys walking around with torches. Because, you had to have the heat to heat up the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Glass vial, and it's like, hey, I'm out here. I'll see y'all later. Because I already knew what time it was, and it wasn't for me. And it was so prevalent back then. And one time I was at work. I was at a water fountain, and the brother walked in. He said, hey, man, how come everybody around you was doing that stuff and you didn't get hooked on it? I mean, it was that, people was getting hooked on that stuff.
Right, that's what I'm wondering.
And I'm like, it wasn't for me. Because one of the things that I thought about, and this is the thing that carried me on, is I didn't want my grandparents, friends, talking about their grandson. Laura and Ed, their grandson, he's hooked on that. I didn't want to bring that shame on my people.
Now, obviously somebody had to bring crack to the city and all of that to the city, but you claim you brought blunts to Kansas City.
Oh, now there you go. There you go. I mean, when I put it like this.
Yeah.
In 92, I went down to Atlanta, Georgia. I did hair. I went to hair school, in 85. So 92 was a hair show. So we went down. My little sister was down there in college. She went down to Clark Atlanta U. And so they said, hey, I got something for you. So, trying to, okay, cool. So I came back. It's funny because I came back and we was taking a bus trip. It was a group of us from work. We was taking a bus trip down to see the Chiefs play the Dallas Cowboys.
Uh-huh.
I believe it was Del Carter's rookie year. And so when I came back from Atlanta, what I did, I went and bought, since it's legal now, I went and bought like a half ounce. I might have bought an ounce. And we were using Swisher Sweets, cigarillos.
Mm-hmm.
Went and bought 3 or 4 packs. I was just rolling. And I was driving around everybody that I knew that smoked. And I'm turning them on. Hey, man, check this out. Now, initially, everybody rejected them. Oh, that's like smoking a cigar. I don't want this, that, and other. Now, so that's when I say I brought blunts back. Mm-hmm. In my circle, I turned them on. So when we took that bus ride to Dallas, I told everybody, hey, put y'all stuff up. I got something for you. So I'm pulling out blunts. I had a couple of cigarillo packets. I'm just passing out blunts. And we smoking. They're like, hey, man, where you get this from? You play like you international.
Yeah.
Somebody know, So we go down to Dallas, and everybody was so enamored with them. But in Dallas, we couldn't find the Swisher Sweets, because they have different cigarette laws in different states. So they wanted to go buy $18, $20 cigars. I'm like, hey, man, that thing break, because I don't know if you ever, you got to get the feel. At first, you'll break them things in a minute, but, and that's, when I say that I was the first one in my circle, it was just funny, something to say. Yeah.
Yeah. You also make claims to being the first to start answer machines. The singing on the answer machine.
I put the music on the answer machine.
Stuff on that.
I put the music on the answer machine because that is what you got to understand.
Tell me your first one, too.
Okay, I'll tell you. You remember, you already know. Because I used to sing it to y'all. Now, remember, I started the post office at 18. So at 18 years old, I had the luxury of I was financially stable.
Yes, sir.
Let me put it like that, at 18. I was 18, I started July 28th, 1979. I turned 19 September 16th, that was my birthday. So I had money to do things, and I wasn't one that was scared to step out and do things. So I bought an answer machine, about in my first apartment, the penthouse, the aforementioned penthouse on the boulevard. I bought an answer machine. I don't know why y'all laugh. Hey, if Michael can have Neverland and Bubble Hill, I can have a penthouse, So I bought an answer machine. And like I said, I was a big consumer reports person, so I looked at consumer reports. I bought this answer machine. So I'm sitting there one night. I only had a straw, one of them straw chairs, that the old picture people being in wicker chairs.
The wicker chairs,
yeah. Had a wicker chair.
Especially the dope boys used to do that.
Yeah. I had my wicker chair, and I had a bed, and I had a chair. So I'm sitting there one night. That's all I had in my apartment. It was a nice one-bedroom apartment. And so I was sitting there. I said, hey, okay, so, back then, you think you were halfway playboy, avant-garde, so I'm like, okay. So I put on some Luther Vandross. And you already know it, because I used to tell y'all about it.
Bro.
You already know it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Luther Vandross, Superstar.
Can I hear it?
No. But anyway, the ones, don't you remember you told me you love me, baby?
Yeah.
Hello, this is Melvin. At the present time, I cannot answer the telephone. But at the tone, leave a message, and I will return your call. Then you that, baby, oh, baby.
Yeah.
It was so cold. Now, I'm going to tell you. Now, you got to remember, I came home one time, I had 15 hang-ups on my answer machine.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, it was some sounded like a white girl. Hey, look, I know you probably wondering why you're getting so many hang-ups, but I dialed the wrong number, and I had to call all my friends and tell them to listen to this message.
Yeah. And
then after that, like I said, then all my friends, everybody started putting music on it. I'm just, and the main one that a lot of people was using was Lionel Richie, Hello, when he was with the Commodores.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, But yeah, I came out with Luther, man. Like I said, this is my circle. Now, I didn't know everybody in Kansas City, but yeah, that Luther Vandross. And when I hear it to this day, if I hear it on the radio, I come in with, hello, this is Mel. That's just some of the memories back in the day, man. When life was easier.
How many times, do you remember how many times you had to redo it?
No.
You did?
Oh, I'm talking about to get it right?
Yeah, to get it right.
I might did about 3, 4, 5 times. Because you got to remember, back then we had records. We was playing records, so you got to set it on the record just right. And they're like, about 3, 4, 5 times. And then naturally, when people hear it, oh, the music's too loud. Shut up. People want to critique it, but but then, you call anybody and they started having, music on the answer machines.
You got 3 boys. How do they take to these stories?
They take to some of them. But now this is what my boys do. I tell them since the era of Google, because when I was telling my daughter-in-law about the penthouse on the boulevard, she looks it up. It was only a 2-story. I don't care, top floor penthouse.
That was big for back then, right?
Yeah,
it was
top.
It was still top floor.
It was top floor. Yeah. That's all, the penthouse.
Yeah.
And Benton Boulevard. That's the boulevard. But now they fact check, which is cool because I know what I'm talking about. But Google will only tell you what's printed. Google won't. They might tell you a shooting on 29th in Indiana, but the streets will tell you, he was accused of messing with his little sister or things like that. You know what I'm saying? You'll get the underlying story behind the news event.
You like to give a lot of game. You've always been a person who give free game. Yeah. Especially to the young people. Yeah. What made you start, and when did you start doing that? Why do you find it so important to do that? Because I'm one of them people you would always try to give game to.
Well, it's like this. There's a saying that some attribute to Hillary Clinton, but I think it was before that. It takes a village to raise a child. And one thing, and I know I've got on people's nerves, sometimes, but knowledge to me is like money. It does you no good if you don't share it. You can have all the knowledge in the world. What good is it going to do if you don't spread it around? Same thing with money. You can have a whole stack of money, but if you don't spend it, it does you no good. And so when I came up, it's like each one teach one. So if I see because I've always been conscious of what's going on out here in the world. And like I said, since I started at such a young age at the job, it afforded me opportunities and experiences that a lot of people at 18 didn't have the opportunity to have. So, and to me, it's not right for me to see you going through some things and I walked down that path already. So why would I not try and help guide you through that path?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, take offense to that. And even with my sons, I've had to learn how to back off of them and let them experience, but sometimes just that parent in me, I want to say something. They get mad sometimes, let us do this on our own, but just like when all you guys came in, it's like, okay, hey, look, I don't know if do you remember this when y'all first came in and I talked to all the PSCs? Remember we had a meeting?
I can't say I remember.
Where I had the management because I wasn't a union official at that time, but I told the MDO Jeff Linquist, I said, hey, let me talk to the PSCs. I had
in that building.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Remember I had papers printed
yes, sir. Yep.
and passed out papers. Y'all told y'all.
I remember that. Yeah.
This is how y'all survive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because of my past experience, we haven't discussed it, but my past experience as a union representative and president, I had earned the respect of management because I was a straight shooter. I wasn't one of those hollering and screaming BS and management. This is what the rules say. This is what we got to do. So they respected me. So when you guys came in, y'all was all new in this world because, I would tell, when you come into the postal service, you in the major leagues now. This is a big government institution, even though it was a zoo on the inside, but it still was a government institution. And it was a lot of young, brothers and sisters. Yeah. And it was mixed race, but it's like, hey, I'm just trying to give y'all a little advice on how to survive.
Yeah.
And I printed all that stuff out, told y'all X, Y, Z about your leave, the thrift savings plan, because y'all didn't know. And my thing was, no matter what happens from now on, you can't say nobody never tried to tell you.
Right.
And that's the way I was.
Yeah, what's so dope about it is mainly your era is game is to be sold, not to be told. So for you to just be giving it all free, and it's not that we even got offended, it's that we didn't. Hey, that's too important. We don't care. We don't want to hear that.
Yeah, that's where y'all was.
It ain't like we got offended because we always took to you. We just like, all right, Melvin. You know what I'm saying?
Y'all respected me.
Yeah.
Y'all respected where I was coming from.
Now your sons they probably not offended. They just, when your parents are trying to school you or something, or even disciplining you about something, it's not that you're mad at them. It's a lot of times you're mad at yourself for disappointing them. You know what I'm saying? But then it turns into, we get real combative about stuff. So.
We had a conversation, and my wife can attest to it, but I was talking to her because, not to sound arrogant or braggadocio or anything like that, but
braggadocious.
Yeah, because of my position as a union steward, I had achieved a certain type of respect from the employees on the workroom floor. Because when I found out some information, I posted on the board. I wouldn't just post it to the clerk craft from which we come from. I posted for all employees.
Yes, sir.
If it was a rule that affected all employees, all employees. And I put it up there like that. And people would come to me and ask me my advice. I mean, a lot of times my word when it came to contractual issues in the contract and things like that, it was gold. And what I was telling my kids, y'all don't see me the way I was out there, because my son, like he teases me like out in the real world, I'm like LeBron James, they be laughing about it. I'm like, nah, I ain't saying that, but people wouldn't believe anybody unless I said that's the way it was supposed to be as far as contractual stuff. Because I was always a stickler for the rules. How can you play the game if you don't know the rules of the game? So I always read up on the rules. So when my sons hear me, just like superstar athletes, when they ask the kids, well, how does it feel for your dad to be the greatest? He just my dad, you know what I mean? He ain't nobody to us. He just my dad. He's the one to make me, go to bed and clean my room and all that type of thing. So us, he's nobody to us.
Yeah.
So that's all I just tell my sons, because I tell them things and I just laugh because they'll find out. But one thing that I don't like, no matter what people think, I don't like having to say, I told you so. I'd rather you just listen in the first place, but I understand why you don't, because we all have to, learn.
I think y'all told you so be like that laugh. It's a little chuckle you do. Once we there it is right there.
All right.
That's a little
Okay.
Yes, I think it's Dominique, the one to be on Instagram.
Yeah, Dominique. Your namesake. Yeah.
He's a powerful speaker.
Yeah, he is.
He's a very I don't know which one of y'all he get that from, but I can see how people could like take to his words. And he got a lot of energy.
Yeah, he does.
I don't know where he get that from, but he got a lot of energy. Big dude too.
I should have named him Melvin III, but he didn't.
Nah, you got him the right name because I'm powerful too.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't want to put that pressure. I didn't want to put that pressure on.
Bro, you're not Jordan. You said I didn't want to put that pressure on him, Brandon. Like Brandon Jordan had the pressure.
I didn't want to put that pressure on him.
It's okay. He'll be all right.
Oh yeah, he's cool.
During my duration of knowing you, I've never seen you in a down mood. As far as your health, you may move a little different or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not like you brought it. I've never seen you bring it to somebody else. Like you don't take it out on other people.
No.
In my presence or whatever. You've gone through a few health problems or whatever. You care to speak on those?
Oh yeah.
Because it's people who go through the same things you go through, and they're just a lot of those people are down on it, but you seem to keep moving.
Well, you have to, because I was diagnosed with diabetes in '99. I remember it used to be a Kaiser Permanente right there where the old Blue Ridge Mall across the street. That building still might be there. It was only open for a while and they abandoned it, but they told me I had diabetes. I was taking my twins. My twins might be a year old, so I'm riding home and they tell me that, it's like diabetes. My whole world changed, I teared up a little bit like, dang. So the lifestyle, so I was diagnosed in '99. Then, I read up on it, and that's one of the things that I fought myself because I read. I do a lot of I do a lot of research. So I knew everything that I was supposed to do, but I just didn't have the discipline necessary to maintain it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So around 2000, I ascended to the presidency of the union, American Postal Workers Union, and near the end of my term, I was a one-term president, they voted me out. I started swelling up. Matter of fact, I went over to the plant one night to hang out with the 201 stewards, and the woman said, Melvin, your ankles are swollen. And so I didn't really, so I looked down like, dang, they are swollen, and I talked to this other guy, said, that's a sign of, heart problems. So I went to the doctor and had to have a couple of stents put in, told me that my heart rate was like 10. And your heart rate's supposed to be between like 15 and 20. So the doctor basically said, you might need a heart transplant. And they called me off guard, because I'm going, to get a checkup. Heart transplant. It's like, hold up, And so that inspired me. It was, that's something different. But then after that, I ended up going to KU. They went in to check out my heart. They had to put a stent in.
What is a stent?
A stent is like a little tube they put in your arteries so your blood and everything can flow through it.
Okay.
It's called a stent. It could be a tube. So they had to put a couple of stents in. But in order to see where the clog is in your arteries, they have to shoot this dye up in you. And the dye, I guess you go into this machine and the dye, I guess, illuminates and they can tell where the blockage is. But that dye is extremely hard on your kidneys. And so I believe, I can't prove it, but I believe that when they shot that dye in me, put that stent in my to see where the blockage was, to clear the blockage, around a year later, I had to go to dialysis and my kidney stopped functioning. So I believe personally that dye might have accelerated the downfall of my kidneys. Even though diabetes in itself is when your body doesn't produce enough insulin to level out your sugar levels. You know, you heard people talk about diabetes, they got sugar. And that's what it is. You have high levels of sugar in your blood, and that affects your organs. It kind of eats your body up from the inside out.
And you was only 39 around that time, right? You said 99?
Yeah, I was 39, yeah, 99, I was about 39 when I found out I was diabetic.
And you already had your kids and all that?
Yeah. The twins were born in 98, Darius was born in 92. But I threw a hell of a 40th birthday party in 2000, though.
What that?
I threw a hell of a party, though. I mean, it was my birthday party. Yeah. People still talk about that party, Damo. It was a hell of a party down in the River Key. It was a nice party.
Since you there, boo, I want to go back to that. What made it a hell of a party?
Oh, it was just the atmosphere. You know, it was a place in the River Market. My little sister knew somebody. It was a nice little spot. You know, it wasn't like black folks was, going down there often. Had my balloon. It was just the whole vibe. You know, 2000, the whole vibe, had a DJ. It was just on and popping, man, for my 40th.
That was 2000. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, my birthday was on a Saturday night. The weather was perfect. Some of the supervisors came down. It was just a hype party. Hardwood floors. That's when you're doing those line dances. You know, where you stomping and the whole floor is hardwood. So it was just, it was just a nice party. It was my 40th. You know,
getting that because you was married by 39 years old too, right?
I was married at 31. We got married in 1989.
So getting that type of scare as far as your heart and all of that, and having your kids and your wife there, do you remember how that was, like delivering that news?
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't, the kids, I told them I was having heart problems. It wasn't like I was about to die or anything. I just needed to have a series of surgeries. And when I started dialysis, but when the doctor told me, first thing I said was, it's too much stuff I need to tell my kids before I die. So I started writing a book.
Yeah.
I think I might let you look through it when he was on the floor. I can't remember, but
you told me about it.
Yeah. But I told him, and I explained everything to them so they would understand what was going on. One thing about my illness, I never hid it from anybody, because a lot of people, they hear about people on dialysis, they don't exactly know what it is. And if you remember, when I first started going, you might remember I used to have to put that stuff on my arm and have somebody wrap it up.
Yes, sir.
With saran wrap. Mm-hmm. That was to deaden my arm, because, I don't know if this one, but here they stick 2 needles in. One needle in to take the blood out, and the other needle to put the blood back in your body. And I go for 3 hours. I go to 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, where they cleanse my blood, because your kidney is your body's filter. And since my kidney doesn't work, the dialysis machine filters my blood, and that's what keeps me alive, me and millions of other people alive.
Yeah. Now, I don't remember I don't remember if it was you or one of our mutual friends who had told me about you going blind this January.
January of last year.
January of last year or whatever. I don't remember if you told me that or them, but I do remember feeling like, what?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about what you already going through, and then going blind too. And I ain't gonna lie, I kind of got emotional, bro.
Oh, shoot.
Because it bothered me, because I'm like, that's a lot to pile on somebody.
Yeah.
The fact that you're able to, when I talked to you, you were still like Melvin. Yeah. You it didn't seem like a different person. I'm like, this just happened, and you good?
I'm not good.
Yeah.
What happened? I went blind in March of 22.
Okay.
It's but when I look back, I retired. I was going to retire January 31st, 22. I had a heart attack January 7th of 22. And I wasn't, I said, okay, after Martin Luther King holiday, I'm not going back to work. I'm like, okay, this symbolism. Martin Luther King, freedom. I'm free at last. I ain't going back after Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
But that Friday, January 7th, and it's funny when I look back on things, how things fall into play. Because January 7th, I was working from home, because we're still coming off the pandemic. At work, even though we was essential employees, we still had to go to work. But we could work from home. The job I had, I was a labor specialist at this point, so I had an office job. So I wasn't going to work that day. But the girls that worked in my office, they were like, well, Melvin, we want to do something for you, because we don't know when you're retiring. And I wasn't retiring, but that particular day I wasn't planning on going to work. Somebody called me, well, they got a taco bar for you. So I got on up, went on down there. I left work that day, went up to the clinic, dialysis, because then I was working like 8 to 5 and going to the clinic after I got off work. So I went to the clinic and I was sitting in the chair and I was feeling uncomfortable because in the dialysis clinic, we were in recliners. They heated reclining chairs. So I'm laying back and I'm thinking maybe that taco sauce or something, I don't know, but it wasn't feeling right. Then I'm like, uh-oh, I'm having a little chest pain. So I told the people that was there, the nurse, so he checked and monitored my blood pressure and everything, and he gave me some nitroglycerin. That's what you're supposed to take if you have heart problems. If you start feeling chest pain, it's called nitroglycerin. He gave me some of that, and it didn't go away. So my son I was about ready to get off the machine, so I told my son, take me on over to St. Luke's. But the thing that particular day, I was supposed to be going to Wichita to arbitrate a case down in Wichita. And I told my boss the day before I couldn't make it. And she was like, well, just because you have a lot of work, that's not a good enough reason. Well, you better tell them something because I'm not going.
Yeah.
And it just turns out it's a good thing because I see how things played out. Because if I would have been in Wichita, Kansas, and had a heart attack and would have had to stay down there because I had talked to my son Dominique to drive me down there because at this point my eyes wasn't good enough for me to drive outside the city. So I had that heart attack. I was in there a couple of days, and then I got, that was over with, and I retired January 31st. Then that Super Bowl Sunday, it was the Rams played the Cincinnati Bengals because the championship game that the Chiefs lost was the last NFL game. No, that wasn't the last game. That's the last time I saw the Chiefs play. Was when we lost the Bengals in the AFC Championship game. Mm-hmm. Then at Super Bowl Sunday, I was in the hospital getting a blood transfusion because my red blood cell count had went too low. So I'm in there watching. That's when when Dr. Dre and them had that halftime show.
Yeah.
I'm in the hospital. This nurse, white nurse too. She's singing every single song they playing at halftime. She knew the words. So I'm thinking, okay,
Look at the culture.
What's up with her? But she told me, yeah, my husband, he's black and I love all this music. It was cool. And so then my kids were on a trip to Hawaii. And then a few weeks later, I had to have another blood transfusion. I was in the hospital and I had to have 2 more transfusions. I went in on like a Monday or Tuesday. But you just walk in, they tell you, they set up an appointment. But that Friday morning, I woke up. And it was like I was looking through like a camera lens where like you can adjust the shutter, the aperture, and it was dark on the outside. I could see through the middle, but it was dark on the outside. So I told the nurse, and they called in an ophthalmologist or eye doctor or somebody, and my eye pressures, there's a difference between blood pressure and eye pressure. My eye pressures was like 72 and 62, and they're supposed to be between 10 and 20. So they immediately said they had to give me what they call eye injections, which they take a needle, they deaden your eye and they stick a needle in your eye and draw out the fluid. So they had to do it in both eyes and draw out the fluid. And then eventually I lost the vision in my left eye. I could still see a little bit out of my right eye, a little bit. And then I remember at the same time my son had texted me and told me that they're expecting a child in June, and it's a boy. So okay, so then my vision's messing up. So I'm going to the doctor, and they're performing a series of operations and surgeries and things like that, in the hope that they might be able to salvage vision in my right eye. For a while, I could still see little things. The last thing I really remember me seeing, I was sitting in the car, and I put my hand in front of my eyes, and I could see my hand. I could see my fingernails and my fingers and everything. And I thought then, hey, I got to get my son to bring my grandson over here, and we can sit in this car, to reenact the same situation, sit in this car, and they can hold him, and I might be able to get to see his face. But it never happened. So I've never been able to see my grandson or anybody else in my family since then.
No, that. Yo,
It ain't easy, bro.
Yeah.
I tell you, because I got a thing that saves me. I have one of those Google Home machines, One of the Google machines, okay, Google, blah, blah, blah. And I've asked it, how many tears can you cry? It said you can cry about 30 gallons a year. It said cry away because you'll never run out of tears. Because there's many nights I wake up, I cry,
But just being able to at least hear your grandchild's voice.
Oh yeah, I hold him, I kiss him. Now, like I pick him up, and I would blow on his stomach. So the last, I'll pick him up and he'll pull my head down and stick his stomach out, and I blow on his stomach and stuff. So he's walking now.
Man.
But it's a struggle, man. I mean, it ain't like I'm just, it ain't no big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because, anybody just close your eyes and get up.
No.
And I tell you how, just close your eyes and walk around your house and see if you know how to navigate your house like that. And that's the way life is. But I got to keep on keeping on. And I always told my kids, even before I went blind, when I was going to dialysis and doing all these things, I'd be driving down the street and I had to pull over, throw up. It wasn't nothing. I was sick. I was real sick, But they had gotten used to it. But one thing I told them, excuse me for a second.
Yes, sir.
My eyes are watering. They just watering. I ain't crying. I ain't no punk beat.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, I don't wipe my eyes off. You know what I'm saying?
Get back up there, Tier.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing wrong with it, man.
Yeah, but I always told my sons that y'all see what I'm going through. The dialysis. I went up, swelled up to like 310 pounds, just fluid. I'd eat before I could even push my plate away. I'm throwing up. We had things. Go get two grocery bags. That's my thing. Put 2 bags together. I'm throwing up. I'm doing all this stuff, man, on the regular. And so they saw it. But I told them, I'm still getting up, going to work. So, in the future, if I'm not around, just think, no matter what you going through, just think about what Dad was going through. And I kept on keeping on,
Yeah, I'm sure they'll hold on to that. Even I'm gonna hold on to that though.
That's it's one of the things when I went blind. Naturally, what could I have done? And it's my fault. I don't blame it on anybody else because I do a lot of reading. I know what I was supposed to do. But just sticking your finger every day, sticking needle in your stomach, measuring your food, reading the labels, it's no excuse. I just didn't do it. So when I went blind, a lot of people, when they have tragedies and everything like that or whatever, they usually ask God 2 words. And you know what those words are.
Why me?
Right. I didn't ask that. I said, what now?
Oof.
Or now what? Because you didn't kill me. So evidently you want me to keep on keeping on. And so what I do when people call me, because you know, people say, well, you sound the same. Well, and how am I supposed to sound? If I want to talk to you, I'm not a sad sack. I don't want to be that type of person. Well, I don't want to talk to him because he gonna be sounding all, you know, down and out and everything like this, because I still have a lot to live for.
Yes, sir.
You know, and what people, when I was having you guys wrap my arm up with that saran wrap, I wanted you to see, because we all, like I said, we all know somebody on dialysis. And one thing about being diabetic, and even though people mean well, diabetic, when you tell somebody diabetic, they don't tell you no happy ending. What they want to tell you is, yeah, I had an uncle, he had his foot cut off, or he went blind, or he lost, you know, I ain't trying to hear that. You know, but that's what people relate diabetes to. The catastrophic ending, you know. And I know they mean well, but okay, that ain't doing, I mean, okay, I understand, but I have to keep that all in perspective. But what I try to do, I try to explain people what I'm going through. You know, I tried to get my son Dominique, I said, Dominique, hey, look, you know, you went to school with digital media, you got to film this documentary, you know, follow me around. Dad, they already got all that. Okay, well, whatever. You know, that was just my thought, because a lot of people, it's so many dialysis clinics that people don't pay attention to. More than likely, in your everyday life commute, going to work or restaurants, you're passing a dialysis clinic. You just don't know what it is. You know, Fresenius, DaVita, the one I go to is a nonprofit, DCI, but there's dialysis clinics everywhere. And the clinic I go to is up on 65th and Truce. And there's 12 seats on the side. When I first started going, all of them was full. And they have 3 shifts, the morning, the mid-morning, and the evening shift. They was all full. That's how many people are on dialysis that people just don't know about.
Dominique, brother, I advise you to get to that documentary. You know, I tell you all the time, like, dude, I've been telling you that for, like, before I even had a podcast, like, when you and Terrence, you know, I'm like, man, y'all need a podcast, because y'all, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I definitely want to get that done. Because people need to hear you. We get to hear you, but I need the world to hear you, or I want the world to hear you, a lot of the game that you give. So I definitely want to get to that. But like 3 more things before we close out, because I forgot to ask you about this.
You ready to close out already?
I mean, I didn't want to keep nobody too long, but it's
got a bunch more to say.
As far as the hair, you doing hair, like, when I was younger, that was like dang near taboo for a man to be doing hair. You know what I'm saying? And when I first heard you say that, I said, what? For real? And then being the like dominant type of man you was, because you was still a man's man, like walking around real smooth, brother, and all that. And when you said you did hair, I'm like, what? What got you into doing hair? And why was you cool with doing it when everybody else would be like, what you got going on?
Yeah. Well, it was, like I said, I started working at the post office in 18. So around 83, 84, I was getting bored. You know, I've been at the post office 5 years. I got to do something else, you know, besides just wake up, go to work. I wanted to do something else. So I thought about joining the Marines. And it's funny, around that time, the Marine barracks in Beirut got bombed in 83. I think we lost 200-something Marines over in Beirut. They brought in one of those trucks. They drove in and blew up. So that was one of the things. But then my sister told me about this gentleman named John Hawkins, rest in peace. He just passed away recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago. Was a hairdresser, and he made good money, and he was good. So I looked into it. This was in 85. I enrolled in a hair school down on St. John's Avenue, Glamorous Beauty Academy. Some Italians, the Nigros, they owned it. That's the school that he went to. And he was one of the prominent hairdressers in the city at that time. Excuse me. So I went down there, I enrolled. I was going to work at 12:30 at night, getting off at 8 in the morning. I went to the post office on Pershing, the old post office, on Pershing, like at midnight, 12:30. Then went down to the federal building at 5. From 5 to 9, I went to the federal building to work. Then after that, I left and went to beauty school all day. So I did that and I graduated. And then I started working at Macy's on the Plaza. And matter of fact, that's where I met my wife. This is the story that, and her mother, rest in peace, since passed away in 20. She came in to get her hair done. And she was going to a coworker, and he didn't show up. So she asked me, could I do her hair? So I said, yes, man. So I did her hair. And then she eventually brought my wife in. She wasn't my wife in at the time. Brought her in so I can do her hair. And I remember when she walked in, she had on a green sweatsuit and had on some knee pads. She had just left volleyball practice. She was an avid athlete back then. So, she walked in like that. I'm like, okay. She kind of cute, got on that outfit and stuff. So I did her hair several times, and I told her mama, and, nobody knew this. And like I said, her mother since passed away, but she verified it. I said, Miss Harvey, I'm gonna marry your daughter. She said, yeah, okay, right, Melvin. 3 years later, we got married. But it was, it was a process because she had a boyfriend, and I worked with her boyfriend's dad. I ain't gonna say no name, but his dad worked at, he knew me, and he told his son, you better watch that Melvin. So, but she came in one time. This was after that, and we moved to a different shop. She came in from work one day, had on a nice little skirt, heels, had her makeup and stuff done. Like, okay, I need to go ahead and start working on this. And our first day was a Chiefs football game. She stayed over in Kansas. She gave me the address. We didn't have MapQuest and all that back then, so they gave me directions. I pull up on this house on on North 18th Street, right? High grass, boarded up. I'm like, wait a minute. Now they look like good people. Yeah. So payphone, they didn't have telephones then, cell phones, none of that was around. So I pull up payphone. No, we on South 18th Street. I'm like, oh, okay. So we go over there. It's storming outside. By then I'm driving. I just got, I'm skirting around, but I just bought a brand new 1985 300ZX. Carolina blue T-tops to 9 yards. Digital dashboard. So I go pull. I pull up. It's raining. It's storming like crazy outside. So she's like, well, what are we gonna do? We're going to Arrowhead Chiefs game. I said, don't worry about it. You got to play that role.
Don't worry about it, baby.
I got you. So we pull up, and my uncle, who I told you was a pediatrician.
Yes, sir.
He had club room seats. He wasn't going that game, so we had 4 tickets. So he gave me 2. He was out of town, so we go in. Like I said, it's storming, so we go sit in the club room. Club room, that's exclusive. You know what I'm saying? So we in there. That's the only game out of my 30. I started going Chiefs games in '67. That's the only game I ever sat inside for the whole game because I was with her. And, she from Kansas, she kind of, I can't say she lived a sheltered life, but it was kind of, so, I'm not trying to throw shade, but, people have different lives,
Yes,
so
sir.
we sat in there and her eyes was all big and bugged out. I'm playing that role. This is what I do. You know what I'm saying? This is what I do. So we started dating and stuff, and then we got married in '89. That might have been '87, '88, '80. Yeah, we got married in '89, But then, like going back to the hair thing, so then that's how, when I started doing hair, because there's another gentleman, Mr. Hawkins, that I was talking about, and I went to work in his shop, and that's where I met them. And, during that time, you're right, because a lot of people say, well, back then, well, are you gay?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so, but I might need you to convince me. Things like that. The game back then, how you gotta, so it was cool. But I went to hair shows and I did things, and I established a good clientele, opened up my own shop in '92. I was suspended from the post office. Let me see. No, wait a minute. In '85, back in '85, I got suspended from the post office the first time. Had a fight on the workroom floor. But because I had just got out of hair school and was working in the hair salon, my rent to the penthouse was only maybe $230 a month back then. So I was making that doing hair, and so when I got my job back. I was dating a young lady that worked for Alan Weed, who was a congressional guy back then. We weren't really dating; we just messed around. But she told me to write a letter, and so when congressional people reach out to the post office, they have to respond. So she told me to write a letter saying the circumstances. Alan Weed sent a letter to the postmaster, and shortly after that, they called me back to work, and I remember I got $4,995 in back pay. And I parlayed that, rode out to Blue Springs Ford and bought that brand new 300 ZX.
Dang, man.
And it's ironic because I come back to work because I'm off work all this time and I come back to work and I'm, a month after I get back, I'm driving a brand new car. And at the old post office, you wasn't supposed to park in the front parking lot. I don't know if you ever worked at the old post office.
Where they used to steal your cars and stuff? No, I didn't work there.
No, they wouldn't steal them. No, there was a parking lot. If you ever went to the post office, there was a parking lot right in front of the post office for the customers.
Okay.
And we wasn't supposed to park there. So naturally, I pulled right up in front under the street light, So my car is highlighted right there.
Yeah.
I'm renegade. So they like, whose car is that? Melvin, he just got back from work. And so I'm back at work and I'm on the elevator. I've been off work since August. I was off from August to December. I'm on the elevator, and this gentleman named Mr. Motley, rest in peace, who was in the EEO. He was up on the fifth floor. The fifth floor was administrative offices. So we on the elevator. He said, hey, man, I'm telling you this, but I ain't supposed to say nothing. But they doing this big drug investigation, and your name came up.
Because the car.
And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm thinking he's just trying to pump me up. I'm thinking. I did talk to him during the course of my time off. I filed an EEO and everything. I was trying to get my job back. So I'm thinking he's just trying to make himself look good. But in about February of '86, I be damned, it was a big drug bust at the post office. And when I say big drug bust, I'm talking about 13 people. CNN was in its infancy back then. 24-hour news just came out. CNN, Time, Newsweek magazine. They busted 13 people. I mean, they came on the workroom floor, and it just so happens it was that day I had to do something. So I came down at the job. It might have been the same day I might have bought my car. I came down to the job and asked could I have half the day off. I had half the day till 6, and I came down to ask could I have the rest of the day off. And I see all these suits walking around, because you know how the working floor is. And this is the old building, so it's a bunch of suits. So I asked the boss, I said, hey, boss, what's going on? He said, oh, go get a copy of the evening paper. So back then, there was a newspaper stand right out front, so I go get the paper, and I'm standing there reading the paper right there, drug bust at the post office, 13 arrested. And I'm standing there reading it, and one of the guys whose name is in the paper, I went to high school with. And he's sitting over there on the front steps, because he didn't have a car, because he was the drug dealer. So everybody would give him rides. So, you give me a ride, so he's sitting over there. I'm like, dang. So, hey, man, you going to be all right? He's like, yeah, got to do what I got to do. So, but that was a big drug bust in '86. And they took supervisors, employees. One guy didn't come in until 7 o'clock. He found out it was going to be a drug bust, so he checks in at the rehab, and that was in '86. So I know I don't trail it off, but because I was working at the hair salon, I could survive all of that. And because that day I came in and left, everybody assumed that I got caught up in the drug bust. Because, quiet as it kept, I was doing a little hustling before I got suspended. I was doing a little hustling because, the post office is a ready-made customer base. You can sell anything at the post office.
Yes, sir.
You got people who buy from you.
Yes, sir.
So that's how, in my origins of the hair business, then in '92, I got my own salon. I was suspended again. when I opened my salon, because I got into it with this other guy on the job, and my wife was pregnant at the time, and I called to see how much healthcare would be if I had to pay out of pocket, because my business was pretty lucrative. I'm like, okay, I'm doing pretty well in this business. Then I called, and this was in '92, before Darius was born, my oldest. They told me it'd be like $438 a month for me, my wife, and my son. I'm like, $430 a month? So then that's when I found out what they call the healthcare crisis. Because when you have a job where you have health insurance, there's a lot of things that you don't pay attention to. So I knew there was what they call the healthcare crisis, but I had healthcare through the job. But that inspired me to carry my butt on back to work when they called me back. And it's funny because the night they called me back, I'd worked in the shop all day. So I called my boss that night to see if I had a night off. They ain't like me. They said, no, you need to report at 10:30. Okay, so I reported. But the thing that night, when we came to work, sometimes we had too many people, so they would let people go.
Yeah.
So I went in that night, and I turned around and left. And you know how the post office is. How he get back from suspension in his first night back? He leave, you know how it is down there. So, but because I had that other job, I was prepared, and that's what I realized. When you ask me how was my childhood and all this, I've been blessed. My whole life, I've been blessed to have, a good foundation, went to a private school, got a good education, got a good job at a young age. I took advantage of the things that were available to me to explore. I explored. I've done a lot of things in my time. So when I see somebody such as you and, all the other, your group that came in at a particular time, group of young brothers, I said, hey, y'all, this is how you survive. Now, if you listen to me, that's fine, because, it's a bunch of them that didn't listen to me. And you know yourself, there's a bunch of them that ain't still working down there now that came in with you for various reasons.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, a lot of people fall by the wayside. That job's not for everybody.
Yeah.
It benefited me. But one of the things, you have a lot of parents that say, I wouldn't want my kid to work down here, but because you work down here gives your child the opportunity to have that option of not coming down here. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people criticize it, but I worked there 42 and a half years, and it did what I needed it to do for me and my family.
When you got back up off the ground after dude put you down, was you still walking regular? Was you cool?
After what, dude?
After dude beat you up at the post office.
Ain't nobody ever beat me up. Come on now, Damo. Ain't nobody ever beat me up.
I heard you lost that fight.
I ain't never lost no fight.
They said he put you down.
Ain't nobody put me down. Who put me down?
I don't know.
No, don't be trying. Are you trying to throw that shade? No.
I just made that up, real.
Ain't nobody put me down.
What you up at the post office fighting for, man?
It was the first fight in 84, 85. I was collecting some mail behind the machines. We had LSM machines then. And the dude come back, he's I don't remember, he wasn't no brother. He was some, Hawaiian, Asian Pacific, I don't know what you call it back then.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, something. And I was trying to do my job, and he come getting all up in my face. So I'm like, hey, man, get on that paw for me. So he, pow! Tagged him, right? To my knuckle right in his eye. And so he coming at me, he can't see, right? He's blinded out of one eye. So I'm bobbing and weaving, you know how you do. I'm backing up on him. I back into what they call him MDO now. Back then they was called General Foreman. His name was Ted Leathers. I don't know if he's still living or not. So I'm backing away. He's swinging wild, so I back into him. Oh man. Yeah, y'all go to a superintendent's office. So we had to write a statement. This is one of the things that my life, so we had to write a statement. So write down what happened. So what I wrote down, and this became what they call folklore. I was getting my mail, we got into an argument. Mm-hmm. He tried to jump, it was what they call floor truck. He tried to jump over the floor truck and come at me. and I had like a lollipop in my mouth, a sucker, and I said, and I think my sucker hit him in his eye, and that was my story because his eye was bleeding.
I would have sucked.
And everything, yeah. And so that's what I wrote down. So when I came back after this 4 or 5 months, that was the joke.
Yeah.
Because ain't nothing kept at the post office.
Oh no.
Yeah. Melvin, hit the sucker in the All right, sucker. Sucker hit him in his eye. That was my story. But that was the first fight. In '92, I worked in the registry section, and we had to exchange registered mail. That's the highest form of security in the post office, registered mail.
Yes, sir.
So it was the vault. So we had to change vault. He was on the PM, and I was taking over the vault on all night. And he was talking on the phone to somebody, and I'm like, "Hey man, come on, I need to go ahead and make this exchange so we can do what we got to do."
Mm-hmm.
And so he got smart and said something like "F off" or something like that. So I grabbed that phone and I busted across his nose with it. There's another 6 months off the floor, and the boss didn't like me anyway. The boss didn't like me anyway, so they put me out for that. But once again, I had the hair business to fall back on.
You had a short fuse for disrespect.
Well, you got to remember, like I said, I grew up in the 60s.
Yes, sir.
It's straight anti, but it was a lesson learned. And like I said, I was fortunate enough to have something to fall back on both times.
Mm-hmm.
Once it was at the beginning of my hair business, and then the second time, it wasn't near the end, but it was when I was, pretty well off.
Well established.
Yeah, because one weekend, I remember my wife, because I'm working, I'm getting off Thursday night from the post office, working all Friday and all Saturday in the salon, and not going to sleep till Saturday, but one Easter weekend. Because my wife, she's at home, and she's, like any woman, where you at all the time? I'm working. So one night I came home, I pulled out all the money that Friday, Easter weekend. I said, "Here, county is this." It was like $2,100, right? I made that, Thursday and Friday. I worked, Wednesday, Thursday, but Friday, I had Friday, Saturday, so I worked all day. So it was like $2,100. So I go to bed and I get up the next morning, I go to work, and I don't know if I had to go to work then. I can't remember. I might have worked 6 days. So I go to work. So I come home that Saturday. "Here, count this. It's $1,700. Is this the money from yesterday?" I said, "No." I go pull out that 21 I had made to add to that 17. Now will you stop complaining? So how you gotta do. So she's like, "You made this much?" I said, "Yeah." So that's where that was, and I eventually sold the shop.
He was doing something extra. Nah.
I wasn't doing nothing extra, but I tell you, it's funny because during that course of time, I had bought, and just how people perceive you to be, I had bought a 94 BMW coupe, and people at the hair salon swore I was doing something else. It's just how people look at things, And then, my coworker said, "Well, he does work at the post office," because they just assume that I'm doing something, because I didn't know it at the time when I bought the BMW, how people was feeling about BMW.
Yeah.
I bought it because I liked it. It was a nice little car. I bought it. I didn't even know how to drive it. When I bought it, it was a stick. I didn't know how to drive a stick, but I eventually learned. But the perception that people have of you when you're trying to do things to better yourself.
Yeah.
Because I've had several incidents where when I went to hair school, I had some friends of mine say that I was greedy. You got a good job. Why you got to do that?
Just assume.
Or that when I bought the Z, I had a 98, a 77, 98. The big 4-door car. When I bought the Z, they accused me of being selfish. You selfish. Ain't nobody but me riding around in this car. Ain't nobody making these notes. But people perceive you a certain way based on their own experience and lifestyle and stuff.
Yeah, you had a car for every year. You
Well, no.
named 30 cars.
I've only had 4.
It sounded like you didn't name like that.
No. I had 4. I had my first car, 69 Chevy. Then I bought the 98. Big Blue 9.8, that's what we called it. I bought that in probably 82, 83, because my first 3 or 4 years, I was riding the bus to work at the post office. Then in 85, 86, I bought a brand new 85Z. Then in 95, I bought the BMW had 2,000 miles on it. I bought that in 95. Then, after that, I bought a van, family. And family came into play, bought a van and stuff like that. But I drove all my cars, 10, 12, 15. I drove them until they couldn't go nowhere but to the junkyard.
Oh, you drove them out.
Oh, yeah. That BMW, I drove it. It only had 200-something thousand miles, but all the glue came loose on the inside. The headliner, the panel in the back, the door panel, all the glue came off that sucker. It still looked good from the outside, and I couldn't get anybody to repair it.
Besides her pretty looks, what made you go to her mama and tell her, I'm going to marry your daughter, your wife?
Because I just felt that way about it. Because she was cool. She'd come in, small talk, little ha-ha, little small talk and stuff. And I just, I liked her. Then, and that was before we moved. That's before we really moved, because when she was coming in, we used to work on 35th and Prospect in Tulare. She was always coming from practice or something, because she was an avid volleyball. She was a track star in high school and all those type of things. It was just something about her.
It had to be something different, because if it was other women you could have married or went to their parents and said, I'm going to marry her.
She was wholesome.
There it is.
Them other women was what they call fast tail. What's that song by Too Short?
Freaky Tales?
Nah. Can't turn something to a housewife?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I ain't, you want to do all that stuff, but when it comes time to settle down, you want somebody who's going to be able to raise your children, and, you ain't got to be worried about when you go to work.
Mm-hmm. No. Why you never wanted to be a lawyer?
I did.
Why you didn't pursue that? I feel like that's something you really could have.
It's ironic. That's exactly what I wanted to do. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of stories. In 1979, I started working July 28, 79. Then that spring, I went to visit Howard University because my uncle, the doctor, was telling me, because of my argumentative style and my, fact-based reasoning that I had at such a young age, you need to be a lawyer. So I went to Howard University. I visited Howard in early spring, 70 and 80. Let me think. No, excuse me, take that back. Before I started at the post office. Hold on, wait a minute. Let me get my thoughts together.
Oh, I ain't never seen you do this.
Well, get my thoughts together?
Yeah.
I got to make sure. Because I want to make sure, No. Yeah, I visited Howard in spring of 79, in the spring, because he had a friend who had a son that was going to school up there, Dr. Myers. He has a dentist shop on 53rd and Prospect. Mm-hmm. I went up to Howard to visit with him and spent a few days up there to see. Then I left there because I did want to be a lawyer. I left there and went back, and then I had started at the post office. Trying to think, no, I hadn't started at the post office. No, I hadn't started. Yeah, spring, okay. So I went to Howard University to visit. Then I came back. Then I joined my fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Shout out to the good bros. And then I went to visit Morehouse College in Atlanta. And by then I was a member of the fraternity. Now I had never been to Atlanta, but I threw on my fraternity shirt and I flew to Atlanta, checked in at the Pascal Brothers Hotel. It was, at that time, I think it was the oldest black-owned hotel in the country. I don't know if it's still open, but it's Pascal Brothers. Checked in there, threw on my shirt, my frat shirt, walked over to the campus. Walked in the frat house. It was, brothers laying around. We talked, do our little greeting. Next day, I went and got my bags out of Pascal Brothers. I went and stayed in the frat house the rest of the week. Went to classes with a couple of the brothers to see, what was going on. Then that summer, they called me at the post office. That's what I said. And I started in the post office July 28th. Mm-hmm. So I kept going to school for 2 semesters. And then, for one more semester. And then I started thinking, I got money in my pocket. I don't need to go to school, so, and that's what derailed me from getting that education. But at the same time, as you might know, but then I became a union steward inside the Postal Service, which was basically being a lawyer without all the fees and expenses. And so I got knee deep into that, and eventually I got elected president of the union. And, I was well respected amongst my peers, I do believe.
Yes, sir.
Naturally, you have haters, though.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's a little safer than having to have people wanting to murder you about a case or something.
Well,
I know you probably weren't worried about that, but
there's some people, because one thing that people don't understand, you see union stewards walking around, the union stewards are now. They walking around doing this, that, and the other, shooting breeze, might be overtime grievance or, days off. But when I was in there, when I was what they call the craft director, I handled all the removals. I took it upon myself. If it's a removal, then I'm handling it. And naturally there's some dissension, who we think he is, but if you think that you're the best at your craft, then you want the most difficult assignments because you don't become a good sailor on smooth waters. You want the rough, assignments where people, their job is on the line and you want to come in and, make the right arguments and stuff. And I was pretty successful. I think one time when I was running for office, my record, my record's like 22-1. I had 23 removed. 22 of them got their jobs back, and I've lost some, some I lost. You can't win them all. But, I lost a lot of them, but that's what I did. But the thing when you're a union steward, the people you represent don't trust you, and management don't trust you because you're going against management, and the people you represent think that you're lying to them most of the time.
Yeah.
Because they go by what they say. And when I was president, I wrote an article. It was called "The Open Invitation to the Days." That was the title.
Before people were saying, "Who is that?" That's funny.
Yeah, that was the title of my article. "The Open Invitation to the Days." So many times in this position, somebody calls over and says, "They said this and they said that." Well, I want they to come over here and talk to me. Come on over here. Send they over here to talk to me. Because it's a lot of the thing now with this political environment is misinformation. And that's a lot of misinformation on the workroom floor because somebody said this, somebody said that. But I never went by what somebody said. I got to the point where I'm walking on the floor. I got my contract. You gonna ask me something? Here's the contract. Let's look at it. And that's the way I did because like I said earlier, you can't play the game if you don't know the rules. Yeah. And I knew the rules. And you was talking about that when I said I was first one to bring blunts and stuff, all that. Well, this is another true story. In the books, it was a rule back then, remember this is 1979, that your pants had to be within 6 inches of your knees. All right? So I came in work one day. I had some shorts. Shorts back then wasn't the long shorts to the knees.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
They wasn't like that. They was short shorts.
Like the basketball players back then.
Yeah. Well, not that short. Nah, but not that short. Yeah, but they were dad shorts. So I had a pair of shorts, a pair of dress shorts, and they was kind of long. So I read the book. I read the rule. I said, So I put on these pair of shorts and I pulled them down. And I pulled out a dollar bill. Dollar bill is 6 inches, but people don't know. The money is 6 inches long. So I pulled out that dollar bill and I put it on my short. And then when we walked in, all the time cards, you remember they used to be that on the second floor. All the time cards was at the front. But that's since went by the wayside. Yeah. But back then, all the time cards where you walked in was on the second floor. And you had to walk up and get your time card out of the rack. They wouldn't turn the rack around until 5 minutes before you were supposed to clock in. And when we was clocking in, the MDOs, we called them general foremans back then, were standing at the time cards checking people's heels, women's heels and dresses and things like that. So I walk in with these shorts on. I remember Harold Gregory, rest in peace. He said, Melvin, is that 6 inches? I handed him a dollar bill. Check for yourself, Mr. Gregory. You know, so I'm walking in. Now this true story. Nobody ever wore shorts at work because it was against the rules. But I found that rule. He asked me, were they 6 inches? I handed him a dollar bill because I had it ready. I walked in, and like I said, you know how stuff flies around the post office. Mm-hmm. Next day, 13, 14 people got sent home because they come in shorts. And they didn't have them down to 6 inches. Well, Melvin Hampton. Those are the rules.
You said you had to pull them down a little bit, though?
Yeah, I had to pull shorts because we didn't have shorts like that. They were sagging.
I was about to say, I thought...
They were sagging before they were sagging. You know?
I thought you was about to say you brought sagging to Kansas City.
No.
That ain't what you want to claim.
No.
I thought that was going to be the end of the story right there.
No.
Sagging.
I pulled them down, but because I knew the rules. So that's why that law, those rules was always my thing. You know, and that's the way it is now. Because, you know, in my latter days of my career, they didn't re-elect me. So I chilled for a minute, and you guys came in on the working floor in the 2011 contract, the PSCs. And so I was on the working floor. Then, you know, I went to the workroom office. And I was there for a minute. Then I went over, and I crossed over to a labor relations specialist, which is, you know, a management official. So my kids were like, Dad, how you going from, you know, the union to management? And I just told them, I said, I just went from the defense table to the prosecution team. And the prosecution team got a lot more weapons than the defense table. So that's my last 5 years. I was a member of management, you know, going up and negotiating with the union instead of being on the union. Yeah, I was negotiating. I was, you know, basically adversaries. Yeah. But I wasn't a hard head. That's why I could switch over, and it wasn't any problem.
You know, I've been there since 2004.
Yeah, you was casual.
Yeah, they had me a casual for a long time. Yeah. Well, I ain't gonna hold this too long because them cameras gonna give out in a minute.
Okay, we can get on up out of here.
I thank you. I appreciate your wife for getting you here and making this happen too. But not only that, I thank you for all you put on me and put in my life. Even though when it seemed I wasn't listening, which I kind of wasn't, but I was.
I know.
It stayed in my head though. You know, when somebody puts something in your head over and over, you know, you wasn't playing with us, but you wasn't forcing nothing on us either.
Right.
Even used to bring us food and everything, man. Yeah. You used to take care of us, man. Yeah. You are forever going to be a big brother, father figure to me or whatever. I always hold you dear to my heart. I love you and I appreciate you for this.
But there's 3 things I want to say before I leave.
No, I was going to have you close it out anyway, so.
Okay, can I?
Yeah.
3 things in those 42 and a half years, my 62 years of life, there's 3 things that stood out with me. There's 3 poems.
3 what?
Poems.
What's a poem?
Poem. Poem. Poem.
I'm just playing with you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. The first one. It's called The Walrus and the Carpenter.
Okay.
It comes a time, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and where the pigs have wings. That's from a book called The Looking Glass, Alice in Wonderland. That's one of the first poems I ever remember. And there's a second poem.
Wait, you gonna break it down?
No.
Okay.
You got Google.
Got you.
And there's a second poem called On Creativity. This is one of the first things I bought when I worked at the post office, when I started working. And this is how I've kind of lived my life. It's called On Creativity by Alan Ashley Pitt. The person who follows the crowd will usually get no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone will find himself in places no one has ever been before. Creativity in living is not without its attendant difficulties, because peculiarity breeds contempt. And the unfortunate thing about being ahead of your time is when people finally realize you was right, they'll say it was obvious all along. You have 2 choices in your life. You can dissolve into the mainstream or you can be distinct. To be distinct, you must be different. To be different, you must strive to be what no one else but you can be. Okay? That's the motto I live my life. I never followed the crowd. The last one I want to leave you with is the one that keeps me going to this day. I learned it in 1979 when I joined my fraternity. It's called Invictus, which means in Latin, unconquerable. Out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried out loud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a perfect closeout for me. I ain't even got to say nothing else. Unless you want to say something else.
I'm through.
Stop being so cool, bro. Don't do that.
What you want me to do, player?
You ain't got to. I'm cool.
This is Melvin.
Don't drop the mic, bro. The goal is to leave a lasting imprint on their minds and their hearts. We pray you've been indelibly marked. Appreciate it, man.
Where you at?